Hi, I'm Ian and welcome back to Astro Time Traveller. In this short video I'm going to show you how I take an image of the moon, and in particular how I do a mosaic of the moon, taking a number of images at a much higher focal length of parts of the moon and then stitching them together to get a better high resolution picture of the moon overall. I'll talk through some of the processes I use, including the equipment and some of the software applications that I need to make this work as well as I can. And I'll also show you an image just of the whole moon as well without doing the mosaic, and you can see maybe what the difference is. So stay tuned, and hopefully you'll see some interesting elements of how to create an image of the moon. Thanks. So here's my Celestron Nexstar 6SE telescope. It's 1500 millimeters of focal length. I use a focal reducer even for the moon, 0.63, so it brings it down to about 952. And here's my Canon camera, the Canon EOS Rebel T3i. So I use it with the focal reducer because with Backyard EOS I can actually increase the size of my image through that. And here we are on my desktop, and if you look in the top left hand corner, the third icon across is Backyard EOS. So let's just open that up and I'll show you what it looks like and how you can use it for taking the moon. So this is the opening screen, and you can see across the top you get the choice of camera. This is the version for the Canon camera, but you can also connect it to your telescope, to a focuser and to a filter wheel if you wish to, but I don't have any of those, so let's just connect it to my camera. So we'll click on Canon. It takes a few seconds, the camera's live on, and then it just brings up more elements to actually taking pictures. And principally, if you look on the right hand side, you can take different frames, whether they're lights, flats, darks, etc. You can change the shutter speed from bulb all the way up to a very high shutter speed. You can change the f-stop to whatever your camera allows, and it picks all this up from the Canon camera. And you can also change the ISO as well, you can see. So that comes in useful when you get to imaging, particularly when you're doing the moon and planets, because you're going to be taking a video, an AVI video. And you can see over here, you've got the top left-hand side, you've got different attributes. So you can do an image one, or one actually looking out at the actual picture you're taking. So I've just got a dummy piece of picture here. We've got the Millennium Falcon going across the moon. First thing is to get focus as best you can. And you can see in the top right, there's actually a little box there where you can get your focus pinpointed. You can increase the scale and the size of that to improve your focusing if you so wished. Obviously, you need a steady night and not too much atmospheric disturbance to do that. But then if we go across back up to the left, and I'm just showing you down here at the bottom, you can see there's also the same things you can change for the f-stop and the shutter speed and the ISO when you're in this mode for taking looking at it, and you can increase the size by ×5, as you can see there just on the right hand side. But you also go back to this one called Planetary, which is the one I mainly use for taking both planets and the moon. And as you can see, you can actually move what you're looking at a little bit around the screen using that square box. But if you double click on it, you can actually move that square box as well, which is what is useful when you're coming in to do a much closer view of the moon, which I'll show in a while, because once you've clicked on that box, you can then go to, say, the ×5, and it will increase the size of what you're looking at. And there you go. So you can see you can get a very close up of the moon. Now, clearly this is a still picture, so you need to get it in focus, and clearly you'll have some atmospheric disturbance, but you then run a video from that. And as you can see on the right hand side, again, you can set up the shutter speed. If you open up too much, obviously you get too much light in. So on this example, I'll just keep it on bulb, but you can also change the f-stop of the camera, and you can also change the ISO. So all of those become very apparent when you're using it, because you can see what the actual planet or the moon looks like in your point of view through this vision. And then the key thing is, then just below that you've got the image count, so how many pictures is it going to take. So if I put it to 1,000, it will then take 1,000 images in AVI, and I'll click down there on the record button, it would have actually recorded it. And then that's what I use to take pictures of the moon. So again, come back out and you can see that's pretty much how you use Backyard EOS. It's a really great tool, and actually they've updated it recently, and I haven't really looked into the most recent version, so maybe I'll do another video of that shortly and see what new attributes they've put into it. But it is a great little tool. You can save your files as an AVI video or a JPEG, or you can save them as both, and I tend to do same as both. So that's the acquisition software, Backyard EOS. If we go back to my desktop and show you what I'm going to use for processing. So I use PIPP, so PIPP as one element of it, and then I use AutoStakkert, so if we bring that out, and I'll show you how I use these a bit later in the video. I then use Registax. Again, this is really good for bringing out some of the definition, and then within that I use the Image Composite Editor, which is a Microsoft tool. And once I've done all of that, if I'm doing a Mosaic, I will then move into Photoshop. So principally those are the 5 main software tools I use for processing an image, and we'll come on and show you exactly what I do with each of those in the coming elements of this video. So let's just go back to my drives and pull up a picture. This is actually the picture I took on the night, and as you can see it's actually a video, so it's running across the screen. It's a very steady night, so you're not getting too much atmospheric disturbance, but that's a single picture of the moon. I think it was the 1,000 frames, and as you can see it's about just over 30 seconds in length, so 1,000 frames, which is what I'll process in a moment, but pretty steady picture, which is pretty good. So I did that as a starter, so I get the whole moon in there, and I'll show you how I process this in a few seconds. But then using Backyard EOS, I can then zoom in a bit closer to different aspects of the moon, and I actually split up into 14 parts, and here you can see those. So here's the very first one I took, which was the top left hand corner of the moon, and you can see a bit more atmospheric disturbance, the moon moving about a little bit, but you can see I've got a much closer view of the moon. So when I stack these 1,000 frames, I'm going to get a sharper image of that section, and by putting a number of sections together I'll get an overall sharper image of the full moon. So if I go back, now you can see I do my second part, which is part 2, and I wanted to make sure I had good overlap to make sure that when it is pulled together as a mosaic, it can define where to do that by making sure there's an overlap between each of the images. So that's why I took 14 images overall. I probably could have taken a bit less if I really worked it out, but I went that way. If I go down here to the bottom one, near the last one I took, I think this was image 13, again you can see pretty good on accuracy for being in focus at this stage. I probably was a bit more focused on the left hand side of the moon than I was on the right. Now let's go into Registax. So I could process through PIPP and AutoStakkert, but on this one I'm just going to show you can do it all through Registax. So the first thing you want to do is pull out the file. So let's pull out the file of the full moon, and there you have it. And effectively I don't really need to change any of these presets within it. The only thing probably is the limit set at the bottom, and decide what percentage of best frames or overall thing you want to use, and I'm going to go for 50%, and then I'm ready to go. So I'll set the alignments, and it'll come up with red dots. Now you can add more of these if you want, if you think there's some missing off key areas, but generally it's pretty good on what it assigns anyway, so you don't really need to do that, but I'm just adding a few in here to demonstrate that you can do that. And then once you've done all of that, the alignment points are done, you can press align and it will go off and align those 1,000 photos. So it's not stacking them yet, it's just aligning them. It will take a few seconds, so we'll jump ahead to when that's finished and we'll see what that looks like. You won't see much difference, the image is still there, but there we are, we're now completed on that. Then you press limit at the top and then it will show you the kind of stacking points that are going to happen. And again, you can leave all these presets as are here and just move on to letting it stack, and it will do the stacking for you. So if we go back to the top and press stack, it'll start stacking the image. And again, it'll take a few seconds, so I'll just run ahead once this has started to when it finishes. And it should be finishing. There we go, so it's now finished. So that is a stack of 1,000 of those photos. So now what I can do is go into the Wavelet section, and this is where I can slightly improve the definition and the focus. So probably a good thing is to use the zoom view and look at a particular part of the moon. Here I'm looking at some more detailed craters, and you can play around with the sharpness or the denoise sections. Probably the best thing is to recognize, as always with astrophotography, less is more. So rather than doing a very aggressive any of these, I would tend to do fairly minor and just see that it does subtle changes. Remember, I'm going to also go on into Photoshop and do some further work through the camera raw filter in Photoshop. So I don't want it too aggressive like that. I want it a little bit more subtle. So I'll probably just bring back the second layer, maybe a little bit lower than 1, back to 0.5, and I've got about 80.5% on the first layer. Maybe move that a little bit more, but not much. And then make sure you always press do all at the top to make sure everything is done across the image before you save it. So I've done that. I'm pretty happy with that now. So I can close the zoom panel, and now I'm just ready to save this image. So I'll save it as a TIFF file. So you can see some earlier versions. Let's just call this full moon. So just need to type in the full moon. There we go. And then once that's done, we can save it. Now we can close Registax and move into Photoshop. There's an old image, but now let's load up this new image. There we go, full moon. So bring that in. And again, you can just open up it by unlocking the background. So we'll just click on that. I'm just zooming in to see the size of it better. And then we can go into filters and go into camera raw filter. And this allows you to do quite a lot of changes, and it's a really good tool. I tend to go into the detail section first and just move a bit on sharpening and any noise reduction I want to do. But again, you don't want to do too much. You don't want to be too aggressive because it will then look too unrealistic. So I just do a little bit of sharpening and a little bit of noise reduction, and then I move into the basics and start off with clarity and texture. And again, just do those. Don't push them too hard, just move them a little bit up probably. And this is all down to personal taste, so it's depending on how you want this to look. I prefer to have a little bit of a darker moon, bring out a little bit of the detail, a little bit more on contrast. So I'll just play around with these, whether it's the contrast or the exposure, and then move through each of the highlights and the shadows, etc. And you can see the effect that has. So as I said, it's all down to how you want the final image to look, and just moving these around really helps you get to the right position that makes you comfortable with it. So I'm just moving these a bit, move up shadows. You can bring out the shadows on the left hand side if you wanted to, or you can close them all down. So it depends how you want to use that shadows. I'm bringing a little bit of whites, just lower it down up a bit maybe, and then slightly with the blacks probably just a little bit down as well. And then that's it, and I'm kind of happy with that image. So I shall execute that, and then we'll go to save that image. And you can see that's not a bad image of the moon, given it's just a single view of it, although it's obviously stacked of 1,000 frames, and these are the best ones of those, the best 50%. So I'll just save that, and it tells me I'm going to use up lots of space as always. And then that's pretty much what we're done on that. I'll do a save as, I'll save it as a JPEG as well. So I can then share it more easily if I wish to. And that's pretty much it. So that's kind of finished on the whole moon. Now let's go back and do these 14 subsets. And you can see if I go across the page, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and I go across all of them, 5 and 6, and then I've got 7, 8, 9, 10. You really need a bit of planning, 11, 12, 13, 14 on the night to decide how you're going to carve up the moon. As I say, you'll probably do less than that. But let's do one of these. So I'm going to use probably the 13th video I took, so 1,000 frames here. But let's go and start that, and let's use PIPP as the first off. So the first thing you want to do is down the bottom, you're going to select that it's going to be a close-up, lunar or solar, as opposed to a full disk, and then go in and select your image. Then it brings that up. And then you really want to go and select the file. Whoops, I just pressed the wrong button. Let's just open that back up again. So select on the file, and then the top right hand action button, which is do processing, click on that. and then everything is already preset for you. So it just does a quick run through, and then you press start processing, and then it will literally start processing. Now for these kind of images, it doesn't really do a great deal. If it was a full image of the moon or a planet, it would center it and it would focus in. If you had a smaller element, it would just give you bringing it all together to make sure that it's going to then stack in the best fashion possible. Here it hasn't really moved much in the image, so it's not really adding a huge amount, but I thought I'd show you it anyway because it's a good tool. And what it does tell you here is that all of the frames worked, so it didn't have to drop any frames because it moved out of the line of the image. So that's good. So we can finish with PIPP, and now we can go into AutoStakkert. So again, if we open that up, we go to open the file. If we go to find those files, I think I've saved them down in my D drive because I'm doing this as a video. It will be in my video blogs and on the moon, and there it is. There's a PIPP file, so you can see it specifically in the PIPP, and there is the video. So open that up. So there you have the video ready in AutoStakkert. You probably just want to change the surface as opposed to planet because you're doing part of the moon, not the whole moon, and then just press analyze, and it will very quickly do a piece of analysis of what it's actually got, and will tell you how good a set of frames you've got. And there you go, that's not bad. So I've got quite a lot above the 50% line, and then that will help you decide on how many frames you want to stack or the percentage you want to stack. So I've got some presets here of 125 and 250 and 25 and 50 percentages. So I'm really ready to get stacking, but the first thing I need to do is place my grids. So I just press here and it will appoint them. You can place them yourself or you can change the scale, but I'm pretty happy with that. So that's covered everything off, and now I'm ready to stack. So I'm going to run through and just show you how quickly this does stack those 1,000 images. Oh, in this case, it's going to go do 125, 250, 250 and 500 under the sets that I've put there. But you can see it runs through pretty quickly, which is good. And it doesn't take very long to do this, and it will save the files automatically. So then you can just pick them up to move into, say, Registax to do the next section. So it's almost finished. It's just getting down to the bottom there, and there we are. So we're done. So that just shows you how quick that is. So we're now finished with AutoStakkert. So we can close that, and then we can go into Registax. And so if we open that, now we're not going to use the alignment or the stacking. We're just going to use Wavelet here. So again, let's go into our PIPP. Let's pick our 125. It's a TIFF file, so just confirm it's TIFF. Select it and open, and then we're going to have it in Registax and a Wavelet. And again, as you saw with the earlier full moon, you just want to be very sensitive to do fairly low level, limited amount of sharpening because it really doesn't need it. The one thing probably to remember if you're doing multiple elements of the moon that you're going to put together under a mosaic is to, once you've done one, is to repeat that for all the others. So once you've set this and you're happy with it, go down to the bottom right hand side of that first bar. There's a save scheme option, so you can then save whatever you've done, and then you can bring it back for the next image under load scheme. So that makes sure you're consistent across your image on what wavelet you've done. So I've done all that. I've pressed do it all, and I've saved the image. So let's just do it all again, sorry. Yep, so I'm now ready to save the image. So again, let's just call it, Moon 13 probably, because it's my 13th image I'm going to use. And when I consolidate them all, I just want to make sure I put them in appropriate to capture them all in the consolidation. So there we go, and that's then Registax finished. So we've now stacked, got a single image, we've sharpened it. Now the next thing we probably want to do is to put it all together. So if I pull out some files here, I'll show you what it looks like pulling all those 14 images together to form one single moonshot. now we need to open up this Image Composite Editor, which is a free software product by Microsoft. It's really good and it's so simple. And just watch. So go into New Program, go into finding the images we want. So I want to use the moon, and I've got moon 1 through to 14. I think I saved 3 images of each. One is a TIFF file, a JPEG and a RAW, but I'm just going to go through each of the TIFF files and just save all of those and bring them in to composite. So I'm just going down, number 9, I've just got to do 10, 11 and 12 to do. There we go, there's 12, and then on to 13 and 14, and then just press open. So it should open them all. Yep, let's just check. There's 1, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, yep, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So now what we need to do is stitch. So you press stitch, the next button across, press on that, and it will line the images very quickly, and then it will put them together and composite. It takes a little bit longer, so I'll jump ahead on that, and that's it. And there you are. Wow, look at that. That's those 14 images put together into a single moon shot. So very happy with that. We can then just play around with cropping. So just bring in the sides, so we just kind of get the black background around the side of the moon. And that's pretty much the image ready, and then we can export it. So I probably want to export this in a TIFF file. So just save it as TIFF, and then just decide where I'm going to put it. It's called Moon 1 Stitch, let's say. So we'll just save that, and once we've done that, we'll be ready to move into Photoshop to actually finalize this image and put a few final bits and pieces to it. So there we are. So that's using that piece of software, which was really, really good. I'm very happy with that. Now I can move across into Photoshop. So just opening up Photoshop, takes a few seconds, but we'll move into that to process the image. So it takes a little while to open. There it is. It's a really nice picture of the moon. So we just unlock the background. So again, we're going to use filter raw, the camera raw filter. So just click on opening background. There we go. And then go into camera raw filter, open that up. It just takes a few seconds to do that. Then once it's done that, probably zoom in a little bit so we can see what we're doing. Let's look into the mountains, where I think Apollo 15 landed. And again, what I will do here is similar I did with the other complete picture of the moon. Now this is a composite, obviously. I'll go into detail first and play around with sharpening and with noise reduction. Again, you can be crazy and that would destroy the image and make it very unrealistic. Or you can just be a bit sensitive and just do a fairly light touch, which will be, I think, gives a much better overall image. But it's down to personal choice, so it's down to how you want the final image to look. And then I go back into basics, and again I can play around with clarity and texture to start with. Again, zoom in a little bit or zoom out to just get a full view of what you want to actually see the moon looking like. And again, I'm not going to touch these too much. Maybe, see, that's what happens if you go fully up for full texture. But let's just bring that down a bit, and that's a little bit better. Yeah, I kind of like the look of that, maybe a little bit less. And then we can play around with exposure. As I said, I like the moon to look a little bit on the darker side to bring out the features with a bit of contrast. Play around with the highlights. I'm just going to finish this quickly just to demonstrate. With the shadows, as I said earlier, you can play around with the left-hand side of the shadows appearing or not. But we'll leave that fairly central. Slightly touch on the whites. Bring a little bit of lightness there, and slightly on the blacks, maybe a little bit like that. So that's it. So you could put full saturation and vibrance, and depending on what you've taken, it will bring out some of the colours in the moon. So I actually want to leave it pretty much black and white, so I'm just going to double click on those and brings them back to 0, and that's it. So I'm pretty happy to I think now save that image. So if I just do an OK, it will just quickly actually action all those elements I've just done in camera raw filter, and then once we've done that, there we are. I can then save this image, so I can go across to just have a look at it. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So if I go across to save the image and just go into save as, and just let's call it stitch with -ps for Photoshop, and then we'll just save that. There we go. And that's pretty much it. So I'm happy with that image. But now let's just have a look at those compared to the other image of the single shot of the full moon, or the full image. And you can see it's not quite as detailed. So on this, the Mosaic, you can see there's a lot more definition. And again, I should have got the right-hand side probably a bit more in focus, but the left-hand side is really good in focus. Whereas on the full image, you haven't quite got that same definition. So I'm really happy with the Mosaic, and hopefully this was useful to see how you can make that happen.